you all again. The New England Antique Racers Club, as you know, has been in existence since 1981. This club is a nonprofit organization that supports the history of New England auto racing. And this organization has grown and grown as people have really started to realize that how important the history is, but how much people enjoy seeing the cars restored and enjoy seeing the racing pioneers making visits out to the short tracks, the roots of racing, as we all enjoy today. There are over 80 antique cars put together by this organization that make their rounds and represent a lot of the drivers that are in the Hall of Fame of NEAR. The New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame is what we're here for today, and it's a neat opportunity to honor those people who have really paved the way for so much of what we see today at the national, international level. These are the people that really deserve the credit and the dues, and they are about to receive them today. And it's also a neat opportunity to catch up with old friends. I often think of this as a family reunion, as when people are racing against each other as competitors, you really get quite close as people have supported each other in the good times and the bad. But you know, now it's just a time to get together, see people we haven't seen in a long time, and just enjoy that for what it is. It's almost like family. At this time, I would like to take the opportunity to welcome up to the microphone. We have a couple of business things we'd like to talk about for the organization, and to do that, we have Pete Newsham, who is the events coordinator. He's also on the board of directors, and he's been involved with NEAR for many years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Pete Newsham.
Now I have your attention. Good afternoon and welcome to the 2004 New England Auto Racers Induction Ceremony. I'd like to welcome all the guests, family, and friends of this year's class and past classes. I have a few announcements. This past January, New England Antique Racers turned 23 years old. We couldn't wait for the day we turned 21 because of so many reasons. NEAR has accomplished so many things in its 23 years and will continue to keep up the memories and to honor the legends of our heroes and legends of our sport. As you've noticed on the way in, we have the Hall of Fame truck on display with all the plaques of the Hall of Famers and soon to be class of 2004. I hope everybody gets a chance to check this Hall of Fame truck out. And while we're on the subject of the Hall of Fame, I'd like to ask if anybody would like to sponsor the Hall of Fame. Now's the time to do so. As you can tell, it's not the most economical truck out there with the prices of gas and the maintenance costs and stuff. So if you know anybody who has a company or would like to sponsor, be an associate sponsor, contact Al Feeney, myself, or any one of the board of directors, and we can set something up. On the web, I wish you'd stop by near1.com. You can click on the bios of all the Hall of Famers. And merchandise is also available on that site. Keeps you up to date with the schedule of all the events that New England Antique Racers attends. There are mounted photos of the Hall of Fame plaques on sale at our identities table. $25 for a mounted photo, $15 for a plain photo. And I hope you will go out and check out those photos. They're very nice. At your table, you received a program. Hang on to this program, as so many of the past programs have they're becoming a collector's item. A lot of information in there, a lot of hard work goes into those. Each member of the class of 2004 will receive an exact copy of the plaque that will be displayed in the Hall of Fame truck. They will be given a commemorative t-shirt and a uniquely different Hall of Fame jacket displaying the NEAR banner on the back. Nomination forms for the class of 2005 are available at our identities table. If you know of somebody that's worthy of becoming a member of this elite group, please fill one out, and we might see them here next year. It takes a lot of work to put on an event like this, and at this time I'd like to acknowledge some of the people that put a lot of hard work into the programs, the whole deal. I'd like to thank Doug Farrow for his work on the program book. He did a lot of hard work, a lot of press releases. I'd like to thank Dynamite Dan Pardee and his wife Marie, who handled all the tickets, the reservations, and did a great job. I'd like to thank Bob Seller and his family for preparing all of the identities for today's event. We have t-shirts on sale with the class of 2004, black t-shirts. There are 10 dozen, I believe, t-shirts. Once they're gone, that'll be it. So buy one today. We have films on sale from the event down at Waterford Speed Bowl. Those are $19.95, I believe. I'd like to thank Mr. R.A. Sylvia, the chairman of the selection committee, for handling all the nominations and keeping track of all the results. Pistol Pete Zanardi, thank you for writing all the scripts and the plaques, and also for doing press releases. I'd like to thank Tom Ormsby, the webmaster for near1.com, for doing the press releases and keeping people up to date. I would like to thank all the wives, friends, husbands, and all the families that support us during this busy time. And finally, I would like to thank our leader, the Grand Poobah, the guy who we think of as the big toe, who keeps us balanced, the president, Mr. Al Feeney. Thank you. And now, under the heading of some unscheduled, unfinished business, I'd like to call to the stage Mary Sestilli and Hall of Famer Ron Bouchard.
Good afternoon. Ron, hopefully you're still wondering why I've called you to the podium. I hope.
Yes, I didn't write a speech, so
No, that's
I might have to
okay.
shoot off the cuff.
That's okay. Every summer, you graciously host a near still show at one of your dealerships. And last summer, the still show was at your Acura dealership in Auburn. You brought the car you'd won Talladega with out and had it on display. I sat down and talked to you about it and how much different it was then as compared to now. I was, and still am, extremely appreciative that you answered my endless questions. After all, I'm sure the questions I asked have been asked many times before. I did ask one question, and that brings you here today. I had inquired about the trophy you'd won and why it was not on display with the car you have so perfectly restored. Your reply was that Jack Beebe had the original and you never pursued getting a duplicate. I always thought they automatically awarded a trophy to both the car owner and the driver after a race. Off to work I went. I enlisted the help of Tom Ormsby and set off trying to get a duplicate trophy made. After several calls to Talladega and talking to various people down there, it was discovered no one had any photographs of the original, so that became a dead end. I decided to give Mr. Jack Beebe a call and told him exactly what I had attempted to do and why. I wanted to get some photos taken and have a duplicate trophy made to be put on display with your winning car. Mr. Beebe said, "I'll do you one better and give you the original trophy to give to Ron to put on display with the car." So Ron, on behalf of Mr. Jack Beebe, Racehole Farms, your winning pit crew, New England Antique Racers, New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame, and myself, here's the original trophy you won at Talladega in 1981.
Well, thank you very much. That was really quite a surprise. This trophy, when I won it at Talladega, and it's amazing, you know, how small they were back then. You know, NASCAR has come a long ways, haven't they, Mike? When we won this trophy, you know, I felt that Jack Beebe deserved it. If it wasn't for him, I certainly would have never, ever been in that position. And I gave him this trophy. Years later, I did look in to try to get a duplicate made, and I think I had the same trouble you did. I called down there, couldn't find out who did it, and so on, and never pursued it any further. So this is really great. I want to thank you and everybody that was involved in getting this to us, and we'll certainly put it on display with the race car. Thank you very much.
At this time, we have a special Veterans Committee induction ceremony, and I'd like to call to the stage one of New England's finest racing historians, Mr. R.A. Sylvia.
Good afternoon. It's pleasure to be here at the 7th Annual New England Antique Racers Hall of Fame induction ceremony in lovely East Windsor, Connecticut. We're up here for two reasons. Firstly, to explain our new veterans category, and secondly, to induct the first three members to join the Hall via that method. Several of our more senior Hall of Fame committee members felt that as time passed, the names, memories, and deeds of the earliest participants of our sport would totally fade from view. This committee presently is made up of Bruce Cohen of Massachusetts, Pete Zanardi from Connecticut, and myself from Rhode Island. We generated a large pool of worthy candidates, and over the last year we've evaluated and negotiated to come up with the initial inductees, the careers of whom started and/or ended before World War II. Our first inductees to the New England Antique Racers Hall of Fame in the Veterans category are Bob Blair Sr., Fred Frame, and Sammy Packard. Now I'll give you a brief summary of these gentlemen's careers. Bob Blair. In the years bracketing World War II, the midgets were the racing deal in the United States, and of course, New England. It was tough racing, and at that time, no one was tougher around here than Bob Blair. In those years, Blair was the champion of the Bay State Midget Racing Association in 1941, 1942, and 1945. He ran third in 1939 and 1940 and was second in 1946. It's quite an enviable record. He ran his own machines at first and then was sought out by the top car owners of that era, such as Nemo Russo, McLeod, Frank Lemieux, the Ashton Orphy, Red Wallace, and others. His worst crash came at Fall River, Mass. Back in the 1930s. The New Hampshire native raced out of his adult home of Dedham, Mass. And left our midst way too early. But his name was carried on by his son, Bob Blair Jr., who was the consummate racing fan. The younger Blair showed the country that staid old New Englanders could be rabid followers of the sport, as he could be found at tracks from Maine to California, and from Florida to Washington State, from January through December. And all this was without the benefit of a driver's license. He too left us before his time. Fred Frame. There are conflicting reports as to his birthplace. It was either Exeter, New Hampshire or Brockton, Mass. But make no mistake, Fred Frame was a New Englander. The family moved to California when Fred was quite young, and he worked at estates where he learned mechanical ins and outs of various contraptions. Soon he was driving the ovals out on the coast and moved up to better rides eventually to the Holy Grail, the Indy 500, which he won in 1932 with the help of some strategically placed chewing gum from his quick-thinking riding mechanic to quell a leaking radiator. Before then, Frame had returned to the East Coast and shown at such tracks as the Woodbridge, New Jersey half mile, where he won 16 out of 18 feature races entered over a 2-year period. He even passed up running Indy in 1930 to race at Woodbridge. Fred loved to run the fair circuit from Maine to Pennsylvania, including Brockton, Mass. And the Eastern States Fair just up the road here in West Springfield. He switched to the IMCA fair circuit in 1937, as at that time the AAA fair schedule was quite weak. He retired in 1938 and then took a ride in the stock car event at Oakland, California the following year, where he crashed hard and he spent months in the hospital, solidifying his retirement plans. Fred's son Bob was killed in an IMCA sprint car crash at the Owatonna Fair in Minnesota in 1947, and Fred never went to the track again. He died in 1962, being the only New Englander to win the Indy 500. Sammy Packard. Sammy could be the closest we had to a Renaissance man in New England racing. For 7 decades, he did it all. Consider the following. He ran the early beach road races at Daytona in a big old Buick. He owned and raced midgets. He owned and raced stock cars. He owned and raced boats, winning the championship at the flooded Seekonk Speedway in 1952. He did some heavy PR work for the first short track stock car race in the Northeast at Lonsdale, Rhode Island in 1947. Due to success of that race, he was invited to a meeting at the Streamline Hotel in Daytona Beach. at which NASCAR was formed. He had one of the first speed shops in southeastern New England. He and his daughters were involved in early quarter midget racing from the early 50s to the late 50s. He moved to Florida in the 60s and became a motorcycle dealer, getting in early on the Japanese bike boom. He worked for NASCAR in Daytona for a time. He became one of the top restorers of vintage open-wheel race cars in the country. And finally, he was the top finishing New Englander in the NASCAR Grand National race at Norwood, Mass. In June of 1961. Sammy came in 9th, while Ernie Gahan, who's out here today, was 11th. Eddie Flemke was 12th. Harold Wilcox from Maine was 14th, and Bob Devine was 15th. And all this while he was in his 40s, running a 500 lapper and a quarter mile against all the big shoes from the South. Sammy also left us in 2003, and he was the last surviving member of the group meeting that led to the founding of NASCAR. So we ask you to not forget the pioneers of our sport, and I will now unveil their plaques. Thank you.
I have one added announcement. If anybody here wants a last-minute opportunity to join Mike Joy and Dick Berggren and others visiting the Daytona 500 in 2 weeks, Rainey Charland, member of the Hall of Fame from the first class, happens to have 2 tickets that he's unable to attend. He usually goes every year. He and I used to go together way back in the 80s. But they're Campbell Box, Section K, Row 12. And they're good seats, and you can see Rainey afterwards or now or anything if you have any interest of a last.
Doesn't that box only have 11 rows?
Right. Yeah, as Mike Joy pointed out, there's only 11 rows in that. But that's a typical Rainey ticket, so you buy it at your own risk, all those who know Rainey.
It's good to see you all. Welcome to the 7th Annual Near Hall of Fame induction. I'd like to begin this afternoon, with a presentation from John Holland, New England Racing Fuels. This is an annual presentation. John, come on up.
I'd like to first start off by congratulating all the inductees on this year's class. We've been coming up here, I think, for 7 years now, presenting a check to Al and the people at New England Antique Racers for 7 years. And what that was profits from the sale of our T-shirts that were done annually by New England Racing Fuel on the winners of the Modified Tour Series. And with the owner's permission on the cars that were on the T-shirts and stuff, we decided to dedicate a portion of the profits to NEAR. So unfortunately, the T-shirt business got kind of competitive, so we don't have a T-shirt this year. I would say this is the end of New England Race Fuel support. We're going to have to come up with a new program and see if we can plug in you guys to help you out. This is a great function, and New England Race Fuel is really proud to be part of it. So on behalf of New England Racing Fuel, Sunoco Racing Fuel, and also we'd like to present this check to Al Feeney for this year.
Thank you, John, on behalf of all the members of the New England Antique Racers Association. A great thank you for all you've done for us. In the 7 years, they've given us well over $5,000 in total donations, and basically that money is what paid for that Mobile Museum out front. So without their generosity and hard work over the years, you probably wouldn't have a museum to honor all the history and the people that have done so much for auto racing. So again, thank you to John Holland, and of course Mike Joyce, his partner, and Charlie Holland, for all the work you've done on behalf of our club. Thank you.
I'd like to point out that John and Mike's contributions are the largest contributions that have been made to the Near Hall of Fame, so thank you both very, very much. In case you had not heard, one of New England's best auto racing personalities was in a serious automobile accident a couple of days ago. Bob Baer is in tough shape, a car crash near his home. He was leaving his speedway. If you're the sort of person who is so inclined, you might talk to the man upstairs tonight and ask for a little help for Bob to get well. Send him a card, send him a note. Of all the people who have contributed in New England to motorsports, it's hard to imagine anyone who has contributed more than Bob Baer. First at Oxford Plains Speedway, which quite frankly he saved from oblivion, and generated his Oxford 250, which for so many years was the premier automobile race in New England. And then he did what so many of us had longed for so many decades. He built a super speedway, he brought NASCAR, he brought Winston Cup, and it just seems like such a shame that he's in such tough shape at this point, so we all wish the very best to Bob Baer. I had kind of a tough ride trying to get here. I drove in from Boston today. I don't know if you folks have noticed how difficult the weather has been over the course of this winter, but it's just been horrid. Those of you who live in Florida probably don't know. And the roads in Massachusetts are so bad. I drove over a pothole today trying to get here in Massachusetts. It was so big, a family of 4 was living in it. But things got better when I got to Connecticut. You know how people drive in Connecticut, how competitive it is here in Connecticut, the way people drive? I finally have figured out how to make time in Connecticut. What you do, you want to pass somebody in front of you, what you do is you put on your left blinker light, people move out to block, and you can pass on the right. It works beautiful. Anyway, I'd like to bring up our Master of Ceremonies for this afternoon's presentation, Mike Joy. Mike started out in the most humble of ways in automobile racing. He was a driving instructor at one of the local high schools here, began an announcing career at Riverside Park, and from there he has gone on to the absolute highest levels that can be achieved in being involved as an announcer of big-time automobile racing. Mike's not just my friend, he's a guy that I look up to so very much, and in no small part because of what he has done for automobile racing. Just to be here today, he got on a plane this morning, flew up, going to spend his time with us this afternoon. As soon as the program is over, he's going to zip back to the airport and fly back to Charlotte. Came all the way up here today just to be with us. You might notice the timing, however, of his departure. Mike will be in the air when the Patriots are playing that team from North Carolina whose name I can't think of. So he's going to miss them getting their rear ends pounded into the ground this afternoon. Good timing, Mike. Of all the people who have contributed to big league auto racing, I can't think of anybody who has contributed more than Mike. His words and what he brings to the television screen as he describes the drivers in the events is just so special. Surely it has brought thousands and maybe millions who otherwise would not have been fans of this sport. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Joy.
Thanks, Bergie. I'm quite ready for that. Please. I don't know where you found out that I taught driver's ed, and I really did. Because like many of you, I had to do something between racing seasons. And for a while it was that, and that certainly cured me of working for a living. I lived in Hartford when the Patriots made their, hanky drop at the state of Connecticut, saying, build us a stadium, tear down your superhighways and your steam plant and build us a stadium, and we'll be your best friends. So there are those of us in Hartford that don't really care very much for that team from somewhere in eastern Mass. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. This is always such a fun event and occupies a high place in our scheduling, not just because of the love of the people who put this together for the sport, but I am continually impressed by the number of past inductees who come back year after year to be showered with requests for autographs and to be shown photographs that get a little more faded every year and heck, even get reunited with one of their old trophies. It's a great thing. I would like all of the members of the Hall of Fame who are here with us today to please stand to a round of applause. You were our heroes, and you still are. And as Dick pointed out, I have the benefit of being able to having the opportunity to describe the efforts of brave men driving cars way too fast from here to glory. And that, too, is very much a labor of love. The internet is a marvelous tool. You can go and Google search a lot of the people that we have honored here and will honor today. And I really want to thank the people who have taken the time to put results and photographs and stories of racing as it was back in the day onto the internet for a new generation to enjoy. Yesterday, I learned that I can now buy a brand new 2004 Plainville Stadium calendar. I could never buy one when the track was there, so I don't know why I can buy one now, but somebody is doing this. There is a United Stock Car Racing Club Riverside Park Speedway calendar that you can buy for 2004. Is there still a United Stock Car Racing Club? Maybe not. But there are folks who remember and to whom it matters enough to preserve these memories and to share them with the new fans that are coming along. And your efforts are certainly to be complimented, and because they are greatly appreciated. Our first presenter is no stranger to this stage nor to this organization. He serves as its president. This is his first time in presenting an induction to the Hall of Fame. Would you please welcome Al Feeney.
Bill Schindler died in a tragic racing accident at the Allentown, Pennsylvania Fairgrounds on September 20th, 1952. I was 13 and a half years old at the time. Unfortunately, I never got to meet him personally, but luckily, I did get to see him race several times as a youngster. I can still remember cheering for the one-legged driver of the black number 2. Watching him race and win led me into a lifelong love of auto racing. When all my friends wanted to play baseball, like number 9, Ted Williams, I was different, because all I ever wanted to do was drive a race car like Bill Schindler in the black number 2. It was a magical time in a young boy's life, full of dreams and hope, and it was a magical time in auto racing itself. After World War II, there was a pent-up demand for excitement and entertainment, and for the first time in 20 years, people had money to spend. They were literally racing 7 nights a week. Bill, known as the Freeport Flyer, because he raced out of his home base of Freeport, Long Island. From April to September, Schindler's schedule was typically like the following. Monday nights, it was a trip up to Bridgeport, Connecticut. Tuesday, down to Paterson, New Jersey. Wednesdays, a simple 500-mile trip across New York State to race at the Buffalo, New York Civic Center. On Thursday nights, he was back in Connecticut to race at West Haven. Friday nights up to Stafford, usually, and on Saturday nights, he was always at the West Springfield Mass track, where he was track champion in both 1947 and 48. Sunday afternoon, take a break and go out to Thompson for an occasional Sunday afternoon fling on the high bank 5/8 of a mile. Sunday nights finished the week by racing at Cherry Park in Avon, Connecticut. That's quite a week, and they did it every week. I just wanted to paint a word picture of what it was like when Bill won 53 feature races in 1947, and to prove it was not a fluke, he repeated the exact same win total in 1948. Bill started racing in the Depression year of 1932. He raced everywhere, trying to make a living in a money-strapped era. In 1936, while racing a sprint car at the Mineola, Long Island Fairgrounds, he tangled with the fence as he tried to make a pass on the outside. The car catapulted into and over the fence, and he was seriously injured. In those days of primitive communication, several people were under the impression that he had died, and one newspaper even went so far as to print his obituary. Fortunately, the doctors were able to save him, but in order to prevent the spreading of gangrene, doctors were forced to amputate his left leg well above the knee. He returned to drive again that year, winning the 1936 Indoor Championship at the Boston Garden. Obviously, losing his leg had a major impact on his lifestyle. In those primitive days before prosthesis, practical usable wheelchairs, and even handicapped parking stalls, Bill had to travel everywhere on a pair of crutches. Bill used his handicap with courage and grace. After World War II, he was often asked to visit Army veterans hospitals to offer encouragement to to servicemen that had lost their limbs while in the war. He was quite an inspiration to many who had lost limbs. There was an often reported story of him regularly visiting the Shriners Hospital in Springfield while he had some free time to offer encouragement to many of the children in that hospital. In addition to Bill's outstanding driving record, he also was very instrumental in many other areas. In 1939, he was elected first president of the American Racing Drivers Club and served as president for many of the first 12 years. The ARDC is still a very viable club today, but while Bill was president, the club enjoyed its greatest success in the post-World War II years. At its pinnacle, ARDC had 3,500 members and was sanctioning approximately 30 events a week throughout the East Coast. But sadly, Bill was a victim of his own success. He and a few other drivers so totally dominated the racing that fans were soon turned off and moved to being fans of the newly emerging stock car racing, quickly ending the heyday of the midgets, racing 7 nights a week. Bill did make it to the big show, the Indy 500, 3 times before that fateful crash in Allentown, Pennsylvania, took his life while driving a sprint car. There's a strange phenomenon about the human psychology. We have a tendency to freeze in our minds forever the conditions surrounding us when we receive sudden horrible news. All of us in this room will always remember where we were when we first heard about 9/11. I will always remember the Saturday afternoon of September 20th, 1952. My family had a farm across the street from the Big E grounds in West Springfield, and every year during the fall fair, our cash crops was packed in cars at 50 cents each. It was one of those deals where you would enter near the fair and then drive a quarter of a mile around the farm and finally park way out back. My uncle and I were out back parking the cars and collecting the money. I remember vividly, a young man got out of a fairly new car, and as he gave us the money, he said, "I just heard on the radio that Bill Schindler was killed at Allentown." I was devastated. I didn't even know where Allentown was, but I just knew that I lost part of my childhood. It is my pleasure here today to present the man that many racing announcers call Bronco Bill. The newspapers often called him Mr. Auto Racing, and my boyhood hero, Mr. Bill Schindler, into the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame. Interestingly enough, his widow, Rose Schindler, is still alive and doing very well. She lives in Lyndhurst, New Jersey. She's in her 90s, and she's a very active person, but she can't drive any longer. There's a sister club to our club called ACOT, and they pretty much focus on open cockpit cars, midgets, and she isn't on the board of directors of that club, and if you were to order a t-shirt or a cap from them, she'd be the person to mail it to you. But we had some wires crossed, and the person we had expected to drive her up today was unable to do it, and we spent the last few days trying to find someone to drive her to New Jersey. She couldn't spend the night, so we had to find someone who could pick her up this morning and return her this evening, and unfortunately that didn't work out. But I am going to bring up Mr. John Palmer. John's the racing event director of ACOT, to accept the award on behalf of Rose Schindler. We'll make sure that she gets it. John?
Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you very much, Al. I don't have to say much more. You pretty much summed up Bill's racing history, and I'm just honored to be a part of the ceremony here this afternoon in Rose's absence. And I do go back myself. I grew up in Six Corners section of Springfield, and at the age of 16, 14, 15, 16, and back in 47, 48, I too would go to Century Stadium, better known as West Springfield Speedway. And the days of Georgie Rice and Bill Schindler, Tappet, and so many of them, but one of my favorite idols was Bill Schindler. So that makes it more appealing, more happy for me to be here today. And Rose is honored to accept this for her. And I will see that Rose gets everything that's due her in honor of Bill. Once again, I'd like to thank the selection committee for selecting Bill into this NEAR Hall of Fame, and also I am a member of NEAR likewise. Thank you very much, and go Patriots.
Our next presenter is also no stranger to this stage, and He's followed a pretty amazing career path, guided likely by other folks you know. He started out as a track rat on the bleachers of Plainville Stadium and started hanging around and writing for Speedway scene. Went from the weeklies to the monthlies, from the monthlies to the annuals. Gosh, now he's such a published author, I can't even get his phone number. And all through this, he's never held a full-time job and never worked a day in his life. This is truly a man after my own heart. Bones Bercier.
Because induction into any Hall of Fame is based largely on accomplishments, one of the reasons we honor Charlie Jazambek today is that the guy did a lot of great things on the racetrack. He won something close to 200 features on 16 different speedways, from Massachusetts to Florida, and on his home turf, Long Island tracks like Islip, Riverhead, and Freeport, he was unstoppable. In New England, the region this hall is concerned with, Charlie was the 1985 modified champion at the Stafford Speedway in Ernie Wilsberg's number 5, and he scored 10 career victories there. He was also the winner of New England's traditional season opener, the Thompson Speedway Icebreaker, in 1986. So Charlie Jazambek clearly did a lot of winning around here. But I would suggest respectfully that Jazambek goes into this Hall of Fame not so much for his accomplishments as for his reputation, because this was a man who was indeed that rarest of breeds, a genuine legend in his own time. There was something special about Charlie Jazambek, something larger than life. He was tailor-made for his times because he came along in a period when modified racing had New England heroes, New York heroes, New Jersey heroes, Southern heroes, and yes, Long Island heroes. Anytime those regional heroes came together, it was special, it was fun, it was cool, it was thrilling. With all due respect to Stafford and Thompson and to their high-profile events, the true measure of Jazambek's stature was better seen at places and races where the headlines weren't necessarily as bold. Sure, you could always count on Charlie to spice things up at the Spring Sizzler or the Thompson 300, but I always thought he made his biggest New England impact whenever he showed up, often completely unannounced, at a 100-lap open competition race somewhere at some little bull ring. Maybe it was the Waterford Speed Bowl or the long-gone Plainville Stadium right here in Connecticut, or maybe it was the Vendetti family Seekonk Speedway in Massachusetts. Charlie Jazambek won at all those places. One of the beautiful things about those open shows was that they didn't have any entry blanks. Way back when, the introduction of entry blanks for major races was supposed to be a great thing for both promoters and race fans, because this way everybody involved could have a reasonable expectation of just who was going to show up on a particular day. Fair enough. But in hindsight, the entry blank took away a lot of the mystery that used to be such a wonderful part of short track racing. By the mid-'70s, you knew exactly who was going to run the major NASCAR shows at Martinsville, and the Race of Champions at Trenton, and the Stafford 200, but you still never knew for sure who might show up for the Blast-Off 100 at Waterford, or a Wednesday night open at Plainville, or a Columbus Day 200 at Seekonk. And on such occasions, it was always a huge bonus to see the Jazambek hauler and that white number 1 Vega sitting in the pits. That was the kind of aura that surrounded Charlie Jazambek. He could make any big show bigger just by showing up. When you signed in at the pit gate and you heard somebody say, "Charlie's here," you knew you were in the presence of one of the great ones. And above all, you knew you were going to see an incredible show. Charlie was one aggressive race driver. When Bugsy Stevens and I were putting together his autobiography, I asked him about Jazambek. Bugsy grinned and said they didn't call that man Chargin' Charlie for nothing. Then, in that special language that the toughest guys reserve for one another, Bugsy added, "Charlie had balls like a brass mule." And yet, let us not confuse the word aggressive with the word dirty. That was the last word you'd ever use to define Jazambek's driving style. In fact, in this day and age, when the trade papers and the modified websites always seem full of angry debate about who crashed who last week, it's refreshing to realize that not a single incident comes readily to mind in which Charlie Jazambek, maybe the ultimate aggressive driver of his era, took out another man to win the race. Jazambek's aggression seemed to be confined by the dimensions of his own race car. That's a hell of a feat to pull off, but then Charlie Jazambek was a hell of a driver. We lost Charlie on a sad Sunday in March of 1987, but no one who saw that man race will ever lose the memory. His legend lives. Two more things come to mind on this special day. One is that on the same afternoon when this Hall of Fame inducts Len Bowler, the most celebrated backyard engineer in the history of modified racing, it's only fitting that Charlie Jazambek joins him, because all but a handful of Charlie's victories came in cars he built with his brother Ricky and his dad, best known by his nickname, Super. These Drzombecs were ruggedly independent and also smart enough to build mean-looking race cars that were light and fast, yet tough enough to stand up to Charlie's punishment. The second thing is that these Drzombecs were as close to a racing family as I've ever seen. Think about this. With most family racing teams, you can clearly see that a father is paying the bills so the son can have fun, or maybe one brother is sponsoring another. But that Drzombec clan was so tightly knit, so much a true team, that in all those years of following their racing, I don't think I ever gave a thought to who actually owned the car or who bought the tires. They simply went racing together. In all those ways, the winning, the mystique, the aggression, the independence, the family involvement, Charlie Drzombec embodied the absolute best of short track racing. He was and always will be the king of Long Island, but I think he'd have been happy to be called one of New England's adopted sons. And I know he'd be proud to be listed alongside the terrific racers he joins in this institution. And so today, Charlie Drzombec is doing what he did every time he rolled onto the speedway in that white #1. He is making a big show even bigger. I'd like to ask Ricky Drzombec, his brother and crew chief and right-hand man for all those years, to come up and accept this plaque as the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame welcomes the great Charlie Drzombec.
On behalf of my family, myself, all of our friends, and the many fans who supported us through the years, I'd like to say thank you to all involved in the induction of my brother Charlie into your Hall of Fame. I'd like to say thanks to Mike Joy, a guy who we all watched grow up in New England and who's made us proud. Bones, you've also made us proud, but it seems like you never grew up. When we were, all of you that are laughing, you know what it's like not to grow up too. When we were racing on Long Island, we sometimes ran 2 or 3 times a week. Whenever possible, we ran any midweek shows in New England that our schedule would allow. Charlie brought his pedal to the floor style of racing with him to every race. The only thing he asked for was the return of the respect that he had for other competitors. In all of our racing, his attitude was, if he won all the races, they had to give him the points championship. In the middle of the 80s, racing was changing. The course were making us cut back on our racing schedule. Along came Ernie Wilsberg. Greg Sachs had moved to Winston Cup, and Ernie was in need of a driver and help on the car. It was a perfect fit. When we ran our car in New England, I always felt that we had a chance to win any race that we entered. When we ran Ernie's car, I always felt we were going to win every race we entered. Ernie is dealing with some health issues and couldn't be here today. We wish him well. Thank you, Ernie. I think Ernie is the only person I know who punched a Spencer in the face and lived to tell about it. Congratulations to all the other inductees. And about at this part of the speech, my brother would probably say, somebody get me a gin and tonic and let's enjoy the party. Thank you.
Our next presenter is another in the long line of folks who have taken their hobby and their passion and managed to turn it into a racing career. I have long tried to explain to people how checkered flag announcer worked, and in this internet age, most of the younger set especially just don't get it. In fact, it took me several years to explain to the nominating committee how it worked and how important it was. But one of the aspects of CFA was that it relied on folks' satellite locations to keep down what then were very heavy telephone toll bills. So it's appropriate that one of those satellite hosts for checkered flag announcer is here to make our next induction speech, and that's Dan Pardee.
Well, in the days before internet and in the days before 900 numbers, Paul Tremaine came up with an idea to have race results on the telephone. And in order to do this, he enlisted a lot of people to help him, and his first was Andy Main, and that's where he came up with the moniker Tromaine, the combination of his name and Andy's. He used to travel around in an old Volkswagen minibus, but it was well known at each and every racetrack. It was later replaced by a Gremlin, which you can see out front. I had the pleasure of hosting the Hartford number, and Rick Mariscal, who has the car, hosts the Providence number when that was in Maine, and John Kershaw did Manchester and several other people. It was interesting because sometimes we used to answer the phone ourselves when people were looking for results from Martinsville, and they wouldn't expect a human voice, and it would really cause some problems. It was sort of like Kramer on Seinfeld when he said, "Why don't you just tell me what movie you want to see?" We'd ask them who their favorite driver was, and it really threw them a curve. They'd be stumbling more than I am here. Paul had some other nicknames: Checker Flag Baldy, which is obvious; Paul Tomaine, because he used to carry assorted food products in the back of that Gremlin that you don't know whether they were edible or enshrined there. I remember one time I got some potato chips that actually bent. I thought it was beef jerky, but I was wrong. Paul did most of this out of his own pocket, and I can't even imagine how much he had to put into it money-wise out of his own, and I'm sure he'll never tell you. But before I got into auto racing, I worked for the phone company, and the installers in the Willimantic office used to tell me about this house, and it looked like a explosion happened at a macaroni kitchen, that there was wire everywhere, and somehow Paul knew how to get it to work. And in those days, the remote answering machines were in their infancy, and he test drove, I would say probably, I don't want to exaggerate, but I'd say probably hundreds of answering machines that either worked or failed, or you know, we're talking 1970s technology. And I'd hear the thing up in my office in my house. He'd be on there changing the message at 3 o'clock in the morning because he was having a hard time getting race results. But I think we all appreciated what he did for auto racing, and I'd like to call him up now, Paul Tremaine, or Paul Trowbridge, your real name. I think we can use that now. Come up and get your reward.
Thank you, Danny. Well, what can we say? I'm going to be very brief. My legs will not maintain my upper body very long. Of course, I could sit down in a chair and probably talk to the rest of the afternoon, and then we'd all miss that Patriots game. But I won't. I'll be very brief. I had come up here with a thought in mind that would reveal all my secrets, what my name was and who I did and what I did. And within the last week or so, all my secrets have been resolved or divulged, so there's nothing for me to say. What can I say, you all? If you've read your program, if you've read Speedway Scene, and by the way, I would like to thank Val Lesueur for maintaining my deadbeat subscription to Speedway Scene all these years. I still, every Thursday, I get a Speedway Scene in my mailbox, and I read it. However, some of the names are beginning to change. In the little article, it said about some of the women in my life. I'm glad my wife never knew about them, but Peggy Goodrow and Peg Summers and many, many more used to call up when I'd be answering the phone, and I enjoyed talking to them. Joanne Bouchard, Ronnie's sister, I don't know whether she's still Joanne Bouchard or Joanne something or other, but Joanne and I used to talk quite a bit. I want to thank the selection committee for selecting me. It's a real honor. I doubt really that I deserve it at this point. Maybe 3 or 4 years from now, I'd have been down on the list low enough, but I still feel there's many, many people in all facets of the program who have done so much more than I have. I feel rather almost ashamed to be accepting this award, but I certainly do appreciate it, and I appreciate all of you folks who have helped me out through the years. I'm not going to try to name them because I'll surely forget them. I sharing my table with Lou Young, and he's always talking about senior moments. Well, I have sometimes senior hours and even sometimes senior days. And I would probably ask if those who may have called CFA would ever raise their hand, but if nobody raised their hands, I'd be totally and completely dejected, so I won't do that. I know you did, Mike, once. I want to thank Joe Golis, who's down at the table with me. Joe Golis is my right-hand man in many ways. He drove that gracious gremlin thousands and thousands of miles flawlessly, never had an accident. One accident we had when we were rear-ended in Willimantic by a guy that fell asleep. We stopped for a traffic light. We were rear-ended, but that was of no consequence. So I want to thank Joe publicly. And I wish he'd come up and say a few words, but he's very bashful all of a sudden. Also at my table is John Potter from Willimantic, who was a Riverside Park racer years ago. And I understand we also had the honor of sharing the table with Bob Blair's sister, right? And I appreciate meeting her. I appreciate and I'm thankful for all the people who have spoken to me even either last night or today. So once again, I want to thank the selection committee, and I hope in 5 years I'll be back here again to meet you all, maybe even less. Thank you.
Fulfilling a need and for the love of the sport pretty much sums up our next presenter. He took a successful racing career, and once he put his helmet aside, looked for ways that the sport would benefit, and is now a rather successful author and publisher, so that more people may learn of the great deeds of our past and present racers. Would you please welcome Lou Boyd.
Thank you, Mike. By my count, Paul, you've just become the 60th inductee into the Near Hall of Fame. And how very, very well deserved, and we all congratulate you profoundly. Aside, though, from honoring Paul, let's just reflect for a minute what that means. 60 inductees. Think of all that voting. Think of all these wonderful annual banquets. Think about all those vintage race cars. Think about that Hall of Fame museum. You know something, Al, Feeney, and the guys at NEAR really have it together. Thank you all very, very much. You know, racing somehow does seem to be an accelerant of life. Somehow the glories seem to be framed by greater accolades and the tragedies by greater sadness. And the only certainty in racing seems to be uncertainty itself. Who was to know what would happen on May 28, 1967? It was a balmy spring morning, the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend. Dick Dixon had finished up his new 8-ball modified the day before. He decided that he wouldn't take it to Thompson that afternoon. In fact, he'd wait for the bigger money at the Stafford Memorial Day race the next Monday afternoon. One thing for sure, he had nothing to prove. At 39, Dick Dixon had won far and wide. He could drive just about any car that he chose to, but somehow he often ended up in his own kit. And looking back at it, we can sure understand why. Those cars were wonderfully crafted, they were beautiful, and they were seriously fast. Race historians will probably remember Dick mostly for two things. First would be his cunning, and winning runs on the half mile at the Eastern States Exposition Grounds. Second, though, he was almost his own form of Eastern bandit. In his case, it was the late model shows, Daytona to New England, and just about every track, every size in between. He was clearly very much ahead of his time with those full-size A-frame type cars. And a lot of very influential people in racing, such as Holman and Moody, knew all about that. It looked like the possibility of a very nice life after '39, and he and his wife Sandra talked a lot about building cars, about continuing involvement on Legion committees with United, USAC, and NASCAR. Sandra was always at the races with Dick. This Sunday, though, with the 8-ball in the garage, she elected to go to church with the kids. Dick decided at the last minute to take a run down to Thompson to see the show, and on the way out, he grabbed his helmet. Why not? You never know. When he got there, his buddy Fats Caruso came up to him and told him the seat in the 01 was vacant. The 01, a top-notch modified, owned by a wonderful group of guys. Why not, thought Dick. He was quick from the first lap. Suddenly, though, that mighty number 01 yellow sedan lost traction and looped lazily into a wooden embankment in the infield at Thompson. The impact just didn't seem that shattering, but somehow the fallout was. Dick Dixon was dead. The next day at Indianapolis, hundreds of thousands bowed their heads in a moment of silence for him. One of Windsor area's largest funerals ever to date soon followed. It all seemed unreal, and it still seems unreal today. So, how very fitting it is for us all to assemble here to remember and honor Dick Dixon and to recognize Sandra and the family and everything that they've been through. May they take some comfort that Dick's accelerated life will be preserved forever in the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame. Now, we're going to do something a little bit different by the request of the family, but may I first request that Sandra and her children come up to the podium.
Time and memories. All the treasures we stored up are just memories of yesterday. Joys and sorrows come back to remind us of life all the way. Our whole life, we never seem to notice as time goes by until the memories tomorrow are gone. Then we let tears fall as we cry. So time passes on by, and then all we can do is look back to them. But as time goes by, I look again into the past, and this is what I see. Day of happiness and despair. Days of all the love that Richard had for me and his children. Today's event, we have given me back the wonderful memories of yesterday that I will always treasure. We have given me something to hold on for the rest of my life. At the time, I would like to say thank you to the following people: Al Feeney, Danny Party, Lou Boyd, Doug Farrell, Tom Onsky, Town of East Windsor, Freddie McDermott, Ken Crouch, family, friends, all racing people, and to everyone. God bless. Love yous.
And now may we have Freddie McDermott from the American Legion come up, and Ken Crouch from the Town of East Windsor, please.
proclamation to Sandy. Oh, God.
Hi, my glasses.
May it be hereby known to all, the town of East Windsor offers its most sincerely congratulations to Dick Dixon's family for its recognition and of induction to Dick Dixon in the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame. Signed, Linda Roberts, First Selectman.
Now, that's an honor. I would like to say, all of this is the honor to the Racing Club Nair of New England and to all racers to show what good American citizens we are. God bless again.
In all the tragedy that Sandra and her family has endured, about 10 years or so after Dick's untimely death, her house burned down, and they were lucky, the whole family was just lucky to escape with their lives, but they lost all their treasured belongings, all the treasured photos of Dick's wonderful racing career. And in memory of that is a picture that I happened to copy from a 1982 edition of the Stock Car Racing magazine.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I'll show you. I'll turn around. It's a picture that Dick Berggren copied from Warren Szynski, and it ran as in the magazine, and it basically shows the 1959 starting field at the Eastern States Exposition Grounds, and the Dick Dixon 8-ball is starting in the pole position, and he was the ultimate winner of that race. And I just wanted Sandy to have this picture.
God bless you. Thanks, Al. Thank you for what you have done.
Our next presenter, you know from, I think, all 7 of these banquets being up on stage, and for his work for various speedways around Connecticut and his past work for the various newspapers of the state. Another fellow who has a great passion for this sport is Pete Zanardi.
I'm here to tell you about my buddy Billy Harmon. I have a football story that I don't think Billy likes to hear, but I'm going to tell it anyway. Billy went out for freshman football at New London High School. And on this one particular day, in this one particular game, there was Billy standing between the opposition runner, and the end zone. Now, I'd like to tell you that Billy made this game-saving tackle. Billy didn't. The guy ran right over him. That guy happened to be Nick Petrosani. Now, I don't know how many guys know about Nick Petrosani. He went on to the University of Notre Dame, went on to play for the Detroit Lions, was an all-star, and still is regarded one of the toughest running backs in the NFL. My point here is that Billy never was afraid to take on tough guys, although that ended his football career. But it didn't end his basketball career. He played 4 years at New London High School and was captain of his senior year and actually led the team in scoring, and they still talk about Billy's 30-foot set shot. They say it brought down snow, Billy. That's how you got it up there. Of course, auto racing took over from Billy, and he started at Waterford and ran against Webster and Dunn and those guys, and then did very well, and then moved on to NASCAR and took on Hamilton and Slater and Bugsy and Gahan and Hamilton and all the rest of them guys that are in the Hall of Fame now. And he ran everywhere. I mean, Billy ran 3 times. This guy ran 100 races, 3 different seasons. Ran 100 races. Ran at, I don't know, 50, 60 racetracks, winning at 14 of them. And he was just so much a part of that modified style that we all enjoyed in the 60s and 70s, the hijinks and the fooling around and, you know, staging those fights at Waterford and playing games at Malta and things. And, you know, and he's got a few Richie Evans stories. And he was just so much real part of that. But you know, I am insanely jealous of Billy Harmon. Because Billy Harmon has, no one anywhere has as many first-hand stories about George Pendergast as Billy Harmon. This guy can, one afternoon, Billy and I sat in his house in Niantic for what, 3 hours, Billy, telling George Pendergast stories about stealing chicken and selling it at Daytona and all these kind of things. I'm just, golly, to have been part of that is like, wow. But I'll tell you what, I'm a big guy, and I'm going to overlook that jealousy, and I'm going to tell you it is with great pride that I invite Billy Harmon up here to become a member of the New England Racing Hall of Fame.
Thank you, Peter. I would like to thank the entire NAIR committees, the Board of Directors, the advisors, the Hall of Fame executive committees, the nominating and selecting committees for this honor. The work that they do to preserve our legacy of auto racing is outstanding. I would also like to congratulate all of our past Hall of Famers and members of the new class of '04. I want to talk about the class of '04. I knew quite a few of them, knew them very well. Lenny Bowler, no question, one of the best, greatest race car builders of all time. I had the opportunity on 2 occasions to sit behind the car and just warm it up. Never drove the race car, but it was just a privilege to sit in one of Lenny's cars. Lenny won many championships, but he had the best drivers in the business to do so. Freddie DeSaro, Bugsy Stevens, Leo Clary. I'm going to tell you a little story about in Daytona. One night after a race in New Smyrna, we were all at Edie's Bar and Grill. It was a hangout for all the northern race fans. Richie Evans had just won the race at Smyrna. It was quite crowded down at Edie's. Everybody's standing around having a beer. But Lenny, Georgie Pendergast, and Richie Evans were outside on the sidewalk. Drinking on the sidewalk of Daytona is an ordinance which is not allowable. Crusoe drove up and parked next to Lenny, standing there, and asked Lenny and George and Richie in the back seat. I understand Lenny opened the door and let them both in, closed the door behind him, and as the officer drives away, Lenny starts singing, "Cab driver, once more around the block, never mind the ticking of the clock." The officer was so impressed with Lenny. He started laughing. He did turn the car around, drove it in front of the bar, and asked him to please to get out and call it a day. And then said to Richie, "By the way, Richie, did you win again tonight?" So apparently this officer was a race fan. Bill Schindler. I knew Bill Schindler all my life as Bill Schindler. I never met Bill, but as a racing fella who was in love with racing, knew the name Bill Schindler. Bill Schindler was a name as big as Earnhardt, A.J. Foyt, Mario Andretti, Leo Clary, Bugsy Stevens, Gene Bergen. He was as big as they came. And without a doubt, one of the best open-wheel drivers of our time. Now, Charlie Jazambek. I raced with Charlie for some good 10 years. One of the hardest charges ever. No question to anybody here. Also, Charlie was a personal friend. I was flying in from Martinsville after running a 100-lapper one Sunday afternoon, coming in, and we were late getting in Teddy Marsh's aircraft. We ran into a little problem. We did have a car waiting at Islip, a 200-lapper that we were going to try to qualify for. We were late getting in. Charlie got in my car and qualified it in 3rd spot, although he qualified his own car in the pole. That was a friend Charlie was. Now we have a Harmon Beaver Dragon. I've heard more about Harmon Dragon all my life because people are thinking all these wins he's doing was myself. But how ironic, there's 2 Harmons being inducted today, and he was certainly one of the great ones. Dick Dixon, knew Dick very well. We ran many races upstate New York together in Malta, New York, and a few races at Plattsburgh, a few races at Thompson. I was one of Dick's fans as a young kid. I was younger than that group. I'd go to Riverside Park, and no question, Dick was one of the best. Paul Tremaine, a checkered flag announcer. Every night after I raced, every afternoon, I'd call Paul, hoping to hear my name. Once in a while it was there, once in a while it wasn't. But Paul, great, great job keeping our legacy going also. Fred Frame, 1932 Indianapolis 500 winner. What a time for me to be inducted with an Indianapolis 500 winner. This is a big time. Without a doubt, one of the greatest open-wheel truck drivers of our time. Now, Sammy Packard, Sammy was a friend of all of ours from the Northeast. We would all go to Sammy's shop in Daytona, look at his historical midget sprints that he restored. Great, great friends, Sammy Packard. And without a doubt, Bobby Blair, one of the best midget drivers that we've ever had in this country. I feel very honored today to be inducted along with these true gentlemen of our sport of racing. In 1951, I was an 8th grader. I remember in New London, Waterford Speedway was being built. I made the very first race and would attend every race from there on. Johnny Brower was a big influence on my racing career. We would go to the races any place we could get to go after school. The very first name in racing at New London I can remember was a fellow named Mo Gersey. Mo was my hero. Later on, I got the chance to race quite a bit with Mo. Then there were names like Georgie Lombardo, Freddie Lucchese, Dave Humphreys, Georgie Pendergast, Hank Stevens, Red Foot, Bill Slater. All of these drivers were drivers that I, as a kid in 7th grade, was out watching. Gene White, Sparky Belmont, just these names makes me feel good to say. Dick Beauregard, who could ever forget Dick Beauregard? Don Collins, Ed Flemke, Teddy Stack, Charlie Webster, Joe McNulty. These guys were all my heroes. Johnny Sandberg, Johnny Thompson, Marvin Chase, Ed Spinner Smith, Dick Watson. And then we had promoters. Rex Records, I believe, was our first promoter. Harvey Tattersall, and then Johnny Whitehouse. Excuse me. Riverside Park. Again, I was maybe a freshman in high school, making our first trip to Riverside. And there was an announcer there, Tom Gowan, I believe his name was. And he did something for racing that still today stays with me. He had a way of talking to the people, talking to the crowd, and his voice was just fantastic. Like names like Jocko Giacomo. He pronounced everything absolutely perfect. Gene Bergen, Jerry Humiston, Dick Dixon, Buddy Krebs, Rennie Charland, Johnny Boy, Johnny Georgitis, Dennis Zimmerman, Moon Burgess, Bill Greco, Phil Smith, Phil Mitchell, Sparky Belmont, and Gene White. Now these are all names that I remembered all through school. Never had a chance at the time to race with them, but later on it did happen. Nora Rainier in the cut-down days, Leo Cleary, Freddie Schultz, Hop Harrington, Reno Taluna, Georgie and Bobby Pendergast, Joe Rosenfield, Mario Fats Caruso, Bobby Sprague, Red Cummings, Garvin Cooper, Trigger Watson, Billy Tibbetts. I remember these names, and later on in my career, had a chance to race with these fellas. Through my 21 years of racing, I accomplished many goals. Of course, I had many goals I didn't quite accomplish. Two of my goals were to race in the Indianapolis 500. When I was in 7th, 8th grade, there was no doubt that I was going to race the Indianapolis 500, and then the Daytona 500. Those two goals maybe became dreams. but I am extremely proud that my friends in the Hall of Fame, like Pete Hamilton, Ron Bouchard, Dennis Zimmerman, have made this accomplishment. Not to forget the Bodines, Brett, Jeff, and Todd, and especially Stafford Springs' great Smokey Botwell, who ran the 500 and finished the 500. I was fortunate to have some great car owners, my brother Bud Harmon in the 5, Freddie Beaver, Stanley Laskowski, and Stanley Mazieski. That was the L&M. That's a car that I won quite a few races at New London, which may be the best modified in the country built that year. Matter of fact, it was a USAC official by the name of Lenny Poe who did come to the Speedboat banquet to present the L&M crew a trophy, saying that it was the best original modified in the country. Then I went on to run for Roland Ballinger, Ronnie Beckman, Bobby Judkins, 2X, Ernie Handy in the 98, Ted Marsh and Guy Barker in the 55, Chuck Rubar in 87. In the Marsh car and in the Rubar car, I finished 6th in the nation. That year, that was my best national finish. Kevin Cohen, Tucky Hoffman, in 73. At Thompson Speedway in 1973, I was a 73 track champion. Tucky put together a Ford engine that was the only Ford running against maybe 130 modified Chevrolets. And we became the top car that year. And Tucky, undoubtedly one of the best car builders ever. Then I went on to run for Ron Glowcock and Joe Zinga in the 06, where I finished my career at New London. Without these car owners and mechanics, I would not have the success. But I would also like to thank the following for nominating me for the Hall of Fame: Leo Clary, Dennis Zimmerman, and the ambassador of our sport, which I consider is Bill Wimble. No doubt in my mind that my days of racing has put me with the very best and would give me a long life of friendship. Now that I'm retired in Florida from auto racing, I still enjoy the company from the very best in Florida. I am on the golf course quite often with Jerry Dostie, Georgie Summers, Ron Bouchard, Brett Bodine at times, Gene Berg and Leo Clary, Bill Wimble. There's times that Greg Sachs plays with us. But we're still waiting for Bobby Pulvereri. Bobby's a avid golfer, a good golfer. And by the way, I know Bobby holds the track record at Thompson Speedway for the fastest lap ever turned in at the Speedway. But I think he has one other thing to go after, and that's to catch Leo Clary on the golf course to play the fastest 18-hole in the history of golf. And Bobby, I think you could probably do that. But Bugsy Stevens says the best when talking about my friends. The Southerners, the Winston guys, had her or not. We had her. We had Leo Clary. I've got a little story to tell about Gene Bergen. I played with Gene just last Friday. And there's times that Gene can throw the club as far as he can hit the ball. And Leo can attest to this. On par 3, the 17th hole, Thursday, Gene hit the ball a little short, threw the club past the ball, and the club went in the water. And another story at Bergen throwing things, we were at Stafford Speedway one night when we all got in a pileup. There was about 7 of us: Flemke, Bergen, myself, Eddie Flemke, and we were all sitting on the infield, piled up. Bergie gets out of his car, takes his helmet off. There it goes, across the parking lot. He's really upset. But here comes Booker with his record coming this way. Gene's helmet's going that way, Booker's coming this way. Booker's record picks up the helmet, Gene's helmet, right between the 2 rear wheels. And here it is coming back to us. Bergie's no longer upset. He puts his arm around me and says, "Billy, that was a brand new helmet," which I think Arup brought him a new one. I would like to have a special thanks to Pete Zanotti for this purpose of me being here, along with Tom Hornsby, Doug Farrow, Dan Potty, President Alfini. Thanks all. Mike Joy, you're the greatest. like to thank my entire family, most of my hair, my daughters, my grandchildren. I have my oldest daughter's home babysitting for the biggest part of this. And I have my little Lydia and Beth, two of my granddaughters. And they said to me one day, they said, "Grandpa, you're famous, aren't you?" And I didn't really answer that question, but I can say today, maybe Beth and Lydia, just a little bit. Now, thank you all, everyone here, for making this the happiest day of my racing career. And if you all know my buddy, Georgie Pendergast, as Pete mentioned, who was a good friend. And Georgie's up there, giving me a pat in the back today. Thank you all very much.
Our next presenter for more than a quarter century has helped keep the history of our sport alive with his columns, first for Speedway Scene and now on the internet. I'd share more with you, but I think Billy just read about 20 years worth of Phil's columns while he was up here and brought back a lot of memories for all of us. Would you please welcome Phil Smith?
Well, anyway, we're here to honor a gentleman today who's put 5 decades into this sport. His name is Lenny Bowler. Now, I started writing some highlights, and I ended up writing a long story, which I'm not going to read to you today, but I am going to read the first page. It starts off, "By the grace of God and 600 horsepower. Those words describe those that drive and own the modifieds here in the Northeast. Car owner Lenny Bowler was one of those. For over 40 years, Bowler owned and built modifieds that won from the deep woods in Maine at the Oxford Plains Speedway to the sands at the New Smyrna Speedway in Florida. Lenny Bowler was the consummate racer. He built his own chassis until he passed away, and also his own engines well into the 1980s, when a lot of his competition was going to professional chassis and engine shops. His head, his hands, and the local junkyard were the ingredients. He was also the master of deception. His ball joint coolers are known nationwide. He made them out of Maxwell House coffee cans, and everybody laughed and joked at him, but the real purpose of those was to keep his brakes cool. But whatever, he's famous for that. Sometimes he wore shoes that were taped up, and he wore shirts that had other people's names on them. In fact, his clothier, Bruce Cohen, is with us today. He was indeed the master of deception. His engines looked like they had been pulled out of a swamp sometimes. His competition would see all of this, walk away, laughing and shaking their heads. It was Len Bowler who would have the last laugh, as his cars always ran up front and hardly ever broke. Bugsy Stevens, who drove Bowler's cars from 1964 until early 1971, stated, "Lenny built bulletproof motors." And that's true. His cars never dropped out. Never. Bowler's diversions would keep his competition at bay, as many would never take a close look at what he was really doing. And that's very true. Lenny Bowler began his racing career as a car owner builder in 1961 with Tony Cortez. Cortez and him stayed together until 62, and then he picked up Don Hall in 63, and then Eddie Hoyle in 64, racing mostly at Seekonk and Norwood. Bowler never achieved the success he desired at Seekonk, but he became friendly with a young upstart by the name of Bugsy Stevens. Hoyle didn't like the big track at Thompson, so on June 14th of 1964, Bowler asked Stevens to drive his car at the Fast 5/8 mile oval. The first time out, they won. They went back a week later, and they won again. Bowler was committed to Hoyle for the rest of the year and let him go at season's end. Bowler and Stevens became a team in 1965, concentrating their efforts at Seekonk. A dynasty was begun, and the legend of Old Blue was born. Stevens won 9 of the 21 events at the Seekonk Speedway. At season's end, Stevens had won Bowler his first track championship. On Columbus Day that year, they ventured to the Langhorne Speedway in Pennsylvania for the race of champions. They finished third behind Bill Slater, who won the prestigious event. That third place finish gave Bowler the confidence that his cars could compete on a national level. Needless to say, on a national level, they did. Lenny's cars won 6 national modified championships. 1967, 68, and 69 with Bugsy driving, 94 with Wayne Anderson, and 95 and 96 with Tony Hirschman. Also, he accumulated 14 track championships, 7 at Thompson, 3 at Stafford, 3 at Seekonk, and 1 at Norwood Arena. Plus, along the way, 250 wins that I can account for. I think there's more. Some of the big wins that he won was the Race of Champions in 1974, the Thompson 569, the Trenton 267, the Dogwood 368, back-to-back wins at Martinsville in 1971, the Sizzler in 1972, Oswego 285, Richmond in 92. He's won 4 at Loudon, 3 in a row in 1996 with Tony Hirschman. One of his most memorable finishes, believe it or not, was a second place at Daytona in 1975. At that time, NASCAR had a 200-mile event on the road course there. And a lot of the modified competitors showed up with these high-dollar cars with trick transmissions and streamlined and everything else. Well, in comes Lenny with his Vega, basically in Saturday night trim. Well, during the week, he went through his share of clutches and transmissions, and so did everybody else. Well, while everybody else went running out to buy a trick road transmission, Lenny took his apart and reworked it right there on a bench in Daytona and clearanced it with a grinder that he used to use on his body, on the car. Needless to say, come race time, Murph Trickler ran away with the race that day. But guess who was second? All the big boys with all their fancy stuff, they were in the infield watching. That was a very memorable race. Lenny was not very emotional at the racetrack. Most of the time, whether he win, lose, crash, or whatever, he would just stand there with his arms folded and follow his car around. If he won the race, he was happy. If he lost, well, it was the same old Lenny. The only time I ever saw Lenny get emotional was in the year 2000. That's when his son Michael Bowler was running a modified. He had one of Lenny's, I guess, a hand-me-down car. And it was a race over at Stafford. About 3/4 of the way through the race, they had a restart. And who's leading coming off the 4th turn? It was Michael Bowler. Lenny had a smile on his face that lit up the whole pit area. That's one of the few times I've ever seen him really get emotional or excited over what was going on. And I think basically that's one of Lenny's biggest contributions to racing. Along the way, he's had some real good drivers. The 3 championships with Bugsy, and then of course the split in 1971 that everybody calls a shot heard around the world. A lot of things led up to that split, which we won't get into here. But Lenny was having problems. His first wife had passed away. He was deeply depressed and basically had lost his focus. And I think when Bugsy left, it had a strong bearing on him getting back into focus, because Bugsy and Freddie DeSaro switched rides. And when Freddie started beating Bugsy again, it got Lenny going again. And they won, and they won, and they won. Needless to say, when Freddie DeSaro got hurt in 1978 and ultimately passed away, Lenny also had his problems. He was diagnosed with lymphoma, and when I saw him at Freddie's funeral, I didn't think I'd ever see him again. Needless to say, he did rebound, and he came back. And he came back and he did well. But that all came to an end in 2001. That's when we lost Lenny Bowler. He was a true legend in his own time. There'll never be another one. And hopefully, his wife and his son will be able to carry on his legacy for many years. Now, I'd like to invite Michael Bowler and Janice Bowler and Peter Karen and his brother-in-law Jimmy to come up and accept the award because they all played a vital part in this.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored here today to accept this award on behalf of my family in memory of my father. I want to represent, and obviously we're all here, my mother Janice, brother Peter, sister Paula, brother-in-law Mike, Jimmy, my father's right-hand man for umpteen years, my uncle Donald. I want to thank the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame, President Al Feeney, the officers, board of directors, nominating committee, and congratulations to all the inductees of 2004 and the ones of the past. Well, what can you say? Len Bowler and Modifieds, they were a fit with over 40 plus years of racing and spanning over many decades of winning, building cars, creating themselves in the backyard and our little shop at the house. The start came back in the the early days, and start came at Seekonk Speedway at the wonderful Vendetti family facility that's still run today by them, and it was always home for us, the whole family, and growing up, and for my father, he could always go back there. That was home to him. With over 400 feature wins, over a dozen track championships, which Phil's mentioned, and 6 national modified championships. Puts him in elite company. He's only behind a few of the major names like Earnhardt, Petty, Richie Evans, and Mike Stefanik. From the dirt tracks in New York to the road course in Daytona, the memories last forever. From the unpainted coupe to the bicentennial Vega, to the primate Chevette, and then the chrome car, and the 100-mile-an-hour tape to the 100,000-mile hibachi, to the work shirts that Bruce Cohen with somebody else's name. And what can you say about the drivers? From Tony Cortez to Bugsy Stevens, Freddie DeSaro to the Bouchard brothers, to Tony Hirschman, and now Jerry Marquis. They've all kept Old Blue up front. And if I can ask a quick favor of the drivers that are present that have driven for my father in the past. I know Leo's here, Bugsy, Ronnie. If you can guys stand up for me, please. Jerry's here. SJ's here.
Our final presenter is new to this stage, but not to New England Auto Racers. As the head of the American Canadian Tour and the promoter at Thunder Road and Airborne Park, he is well known to racers and to fellow promoters. He's a past promoter of the year and joins us this afternoon with our north of the Massachusetts border inductee. Please welcome Tom Curley.
So about 80 to 85% of you in here are old duffers, and if you're like me, you really need to get to that men's room, so I'm not going to take too long. Al Feeney calls me up, and he says, we want you to do the presenting of Beaver Dragon for us at the Hall of Fame banquet. We'd like you to keep your remarks to 5 minutes. First of all, I've never given a speech in under 45 minutes in my life. And second of all, after Billy Harmon, I know I'm cut down to about 2 now, so. You know, this banquet becomes more and more special the older we get, and I think it's why a lot of the older people in New England gather here year in and year out as we go forward. As I've gotten older, especially in the last couple of years, I've asked myself, from my own perspective, where have all these heroes gone? Where are they when they talk about what's going on in our business today? I would invite anybody that has that same question to come to this room, because this is truly where the old heroes are. And I think that for us to replicate that going forward is going to be very, very difficult based on what's happened in our society over the last 20 years. As a short track fan, I honor all of you who are past Hall of Famers and certainly congratulate all of you in the class of 2004. I've been asked to present Harmon Beaver Dragon to this class for his induction into the Hall of Fame. It's special to me because he's been a very real friend of mine for over 40 years. I met him at Catamount Stadium when it was first built, in his hometown of Milton, Vermont. My meeting was memorable. I was a young 18 or 19-year-old. I was standing in the pits. Nighttime race, guy comes down the front stretch, he flips it down on the asphalt and over into turn one. This guy, who was considerably older than me, about 2 years I think, comes running out of the pit stand, grabs me by the arm. He says, "That was a hell of a wreck. We got to go get that guy out of this thing." And out the gate we go down into the infield to try to help this guy. This is typical of Beaver. He cares about the sport, and he has for these many, many years. Beaver Dragon was always the racer that you wanted your 7-year-old to meet and get an autograph from after the race. Well, first of all, I mean, what 7-year-old wouldn't want to go meet a Beaver Dragon? And as a sidebar, incidentally, he got his name because in high school he used to work in a shop in Milton, and some old guy looked at him and says, "Man, he does work like a beaver," even though he did have the red hair and he did have the Opie look a little bit back then, but it was still because he worked so hard and the older generation thought of him as working like a beaver. That's just a sidebar. The real reason that dads and moms wanted to go down and have their kids get the autograph from Beaver was because you could always count on him. He had great respect for the sport and for the business before his own personal failures on the racetrack, his own disappointments, always combined with that smile and always a handshake and an autograph for the little kids. Beaver is old school, like many of you in this room. He understood all aspects of the business of short track racing. He was always constructive and always very willing to point out to a promoter, especially a young one, how to improve the facility in terms of safety, promotion, or procedures. And he was also willing to give his time, his energy, and his expertise in helping you in that cause. He was just as thoughtful and eager to let the press and the promoters know how good a race event was when it was done correctly, whether he won or lost. Beaver cared about our sport then, and he still does today. His peers and acquaintances have been the true icons of modern-day Northeast stock car racing. As a young racer, he was a leader of a group who bridged the transition between the old dirt, flathead pioneers. He also helped regionalize our sport when he was instantly successful racing that crazy modified Pinto of his against the newer legends from the old days, guys like Bugsy and Lazaro and DeCero and Shoemaker, and Flemke, and Cook, Donnie McTavish, Charland, and dozens more just like him. And how proud we were being up north as pretty much late model racers when they'd come to Catamount for the All-Star League. And the one guy that would stand up to him was Beaver Dragon, eager to take on any and all comers. He did that with the New Yorkers, the Canadians, and throughout New England. Over his illustrious 40-plus years of racing, he's raced modifieds, he's raced on dirt, he's raced asphalt, he'd race anything, anywhere. For over those 40 years, the kid from the little New England state of Vermont always gained respect for how he raced and how he treated the business, most importantly. Some of what made him great in our eyes, unlike many of the racers today, Beaver loved to work on his own car. It was not just like today where they take the microwave society bolt-on parts. He was under them more than not after practice sessions. He was also eager to share his knowledge with the newcomers coming up. His theory, I'd rather have them out there running right than squirrely, because then when I go by them, I get a much better chance that way. He was also perhaps the greatest point racer of his time. He knew better than most when to take chances for the win and when to lift for a finish if a win wasn't in the cards that day. He was as smooth as could be on the bull rings and brutally competitive on his favorite long tracks. Nearly unbeatable at the 7/8 mile Senair Speedway in Montreal, his favorites beyond Senair were always what we northern New England thought of as the big tracks. Dover, Thompson, Stafford. That's where Beaver shined and where he liked it best. Beaver Dragon's peers in his racing, and truly his friends, were Dave Dion, Dick McCabe, Jean-Paul Cabana, Junior Hanley, Robbie Crouch, brother Bobby Dragon, Stub Fadden. Truly, these were the greatest late model heroes that we've ever produced in the Northeast. as well as dozens of promoters and officials who would all stand here and tell you of the respect they have for Beaver Dragon's talent, his loyalty, his dedication, his passion, and his 40 years of perseverance for our sport. Over the past 25 years, I've been able to travel with Beaver to 13 different states, 4 provinces, and 58 different racetracks, including tracks like Nashville, Martinsville, Milwaukee, Dover, Nazareth, Mossport, and what seems like every short track between the shores of Lake Huron and Western Ontario, all the way to the ocean's edge in Nova Scotia. What's truly remarkable is that Beaver's wife, Jane, has not only put up with this schedule, but also traveled virtually every single mile for those 40 years to the same events. She truly deserves to also be in the Hall of Fame today. Beaver is also in that race group of special Northeast track racers who years ago, like many of you here, at young ages, followed their dreams just once to travel to Daytona and test the high banks where their heroes, Freddie Lorenzen, Bobby Isaac, Petty's, Pearsons, Allison Yarbroughs, were making history books sizzle and building foundations for the future. He went to Daytona and fulfilled that dream. Back in the old days, to win a Charlotte qualifier at your home short track meant another chance to bring fame to you as a racer, for your career, to your state, and certainly to your short track. We all went, not as a promoter and as officials, but we all used to go to that fall classic in Charlotte just to watch one of our own race the legendary Charlotte Motor Speedway. It was Beaver Dragon who got us there back in those days. Today, you can still see Beaver, his daughter Michelle, and certainly wife Jane in the pits at most ACT late model races. Now it's to support the championship efforts of his son Brent as he carries the Dragon family tradition of winning races, championships, and respect around to Northeast late model tracks. Beaver still gives back to the sport he loves, and we're all better having seen him and still able to associate with him. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you for your induction his induction into the 2004 Hall of Fame, Vermont's native son and champion, Beaver Dragon.
There's so many nice people here that I used to race with throughout my, my racing career that I haven't seen for so long. I just cannot believe how many race car drivers and owners and pit crew that are here today that I just haven't seen these people forever. And I guess we don't get out of Vermont very often. We better be coming south, I guess, to see these people. But I enjoy being here, and I wish I could still say that I was on the racetrack, but it's not in the card, so I'll just watch my son and other people like that. But anyways, I was surprised to get a call from Doug Farrow, and he told me that I was going to be one of the 7 people to be inducted into the Near Hall of Fame this year. And I guess I never thought that I would be, inducted. I just had that in my mind that this probably ain't never going to happen, but it did. But I'm sure glad to be, along with the names such as Bugsy Stevens, Charlie Jazombach, Lenny Bowler, Leo Clary, Rennie Charland, S.J. Avanchin, people like that, that I've known and raced with somewheres in my career. And these guys back when I was racing they were my idols, and I looked up to these people, and I wanted to be just like them, and well, here I am. I have raced, of course, against some of them, and one night, I can remember one night a show sticks out. This was back at Catamount Stadium in Milton. They had what they called the All-Star League, and every week the best modified drivers in the country were there, and you'd get Jerry Cook, Bugsy, Pete Hamilton, Don McTavish, Richie Evans. That's just to name a few. And back then, I was driving a coupe. I had a '39 Chevy coupe, and it was called a sportsman car at the time. And it didn't have a big engine like them fellas had. I had only a 283 Chevrolet engine in my car, and
They would let us run against the big name cars, but they would always let us start up front. Well, that night we started up front, and I beat them all. And I remember, I think Bugsy was the one that was right behind me for quite a while, and he never did beat me, and that was like me winning the Daytona 500. That was one of the biggest of my career. I had fun racing in the 40-plus years of my career. I had some real good car owners that, you know, I drove for, and we won some races. We won some championships along the way. I would like to thank all the car owners and pit crews that helped me get to where I am today. There are too many owners and pit crews to mention. I would forget somebody if I tried naming all of them, so I will just say thank you to all the people, and they know who they are. Also, I would like to say thank you to my family. My daughter, Michelle, Brent, my son, who is now into racing on the ACT Tour, and his wife, June. And then there's my brother, Bobby, who I've raced against many times and had a lot of fun. Also, there were times when it wasn't so much fun. Bobby and I would race harder against each other, I think, than we did against the whole rest of the field, sometimes resulting in over the bank or in the fence. But next week, it would be another race, and all would be forgotten. Then there's my wife, Jane, who has been with me to just about every race I've been to. She would not miss a race today, you know, as long as Brent was racing, and neither would I. I guess a couple of my favorite times were when I won the 79 and 80 NASCAR North Championships. I was driving a car for Quint Bovair out of Littleton, New Hampshire. And them 2 years we won the championships, and we did pretty well. I also remember winning 10 races one summer at Airborne Speedway in Plattsburgh, New York. And that was quite a feat for me. I can also remember racing for Tom Curley one summer when we ran 77 races in one summer. And some of you guys ought to try that and try to hold a job besides. We'd race 5 nights a week. We'd start on Wednesdays and end up on Sunday nights. We'd race in Canada, Vermont, New York, wherever the tour took us. And we really had a lot of fun doing this, but it was kind of hard. But we managed, we did it, and we had a real good time. Then, maybe some of you probably have read part of this story in the brochure, but my experience going to Daytona. Of course, everybody dreams of going and racing at Daytona. Well, Bob Baer, I'm getting ahead of myself. I got my chance in '74. Back in '73, I was a track champion, and anybody that was a track champion for NASCAR was guaranteed a start at Daytona for the Permatex 300 if you could qualify at 150 miles per hour. Well, Bob Baer called me up, and he said, would you like to go to Daytona? I said, you're a track champion. And he said, would you like to go to Daytona? And I said, you know what the answer is? Of course, I'd like to go to Daytona. I don't have a car. He said, well, we do. And we agreed that we would go to Daytona and see what we could do. Well, my car owner from home and I got on this plane, and we flew to Daytona to meet the Bears. There was Bob and Dick in the pits with the car and stuff. And I meet them people, and of course on the way down on the airplane, my car owner and I, we had a few beers. And so, nothing that we didn't get intoxicated or nothing, but anyways, we get to Daytona, and first thing in order is you have to go, before you go on the racetrack, I had to go to the infield care center and have a physical. Well, I went for my physical, and I passed everything except the blood pressure. It was because of the few bottles of beer that I've had. So the doctor tells me, he said, I can't let you go on the racetrack today. He said, you're going to miss today's practice. And he said, he said, I'll give you some pills. You come back, tomorrow morning, take these pills, don't drink anymore, come back tomorrow morning, and you'll be fine. So I did what he said, went back the next day, I was fine, but I did miss that day of practice. So we went out and we practiced, and to run, 150 miles per hour, that's not too much of a feat at Daytona, but I'd never seen a racetrack that big, biggest I'd seen was a half mile at Plattsburgh, New York, and a quarter mile at Barrie, Vermont. Long ways from them two places. Anyways, we got there and we went on to the racetrack, and I remember qualifying at 163 the first time out, but I was having problems. I could not make my foot stay down in the corner. It would come up. It seemed like we were going way too fast. We ain't never going to make this corner. But so, anyways, we kept practicing, and of course, in between practice, after practice and stuff, I'd have to go for a rookie orientation with in this building, and Benny Parsons happened to be the person that was giving this. And he told us the things to look for, what to do if you see this happening, what to do if whatever, different things. And finally he got all through it. He said, anybody got any questions? And I said, yeah. I said, I got a problem. I said, I know there's fellows out here that are holding this thing, holding their cars right to the floor all the way around, and I just can't make my foot stay down in that corner. It lifts a little bit, and I know I'm losing time. So he said, well, I don't see where that's a problem. He said, we got some Winston Cup guys that can't do that. But he said, I'll tell you one thing. He said, I'll bet you that during the race, once you get in the race, get settled down a little bit, that if you don't do it before, you will try it during the race, and if you make it, it'll be fine. Well, I started 40th. I remember starting 40th in that race, and I don't remember how many laps it was before I finally decided I've got to do something. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not losing much ground, but I'm not going anywhere either. So I said, there's either going to be a hell of a crash or I'm going to make it, one or the other. Well, I held it down, and it was no different than what I'd been doing all, 2-3 days. And make a long story short, we ended up finishing that race in the top. It was either 15th or 19th for the 300-mile race, and Bobby Allison won the show, and that was one of the highlights of my career, and it was fun doing it. But of course, I just wish I could start over, but I can't. So I'll go on and go with Brent and watch him race, and also my brother Bobby. I would like to stay involved in racing, of course, with ACT if I can, because that's where my son races, and that's where all my friends are that I've raced with all my life. And well, I guess I've talked long enough, so I'll say thank you again to all the people that make NEAR such a great organization, and everybody that helped me get to throughout my career. Thank you.
We're going to ask all of this year's class of inductees to stay around for photographs. I'd like you to take special note of the souvenir programs today and take them with you. There's some great stories in there. I never knew that Charlie Jazambek and Carl Yastrzemski were cousins. I did know the Boulder Ball Joint cooler story, but the way we all knew it was a Maxwell House coffee can that was cut down for that purpose was that Lenny couldn't be bothered to waste paint on it. And there's a lot of great things in there, including how any of you that are here with us can nominate your favorite drivers and other folks in racing to be considered for induction into the Hall of Fame. Thank you.